All right, so good morning and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the 4 R's of Dairy Manure webinar this morning. My name is Janelle McHenry. I am the Executive Director of the Mid-Atlantic 4R Nutrient Stewardship Association, and our team is honored to have you here today. First, I would like to thank Amanda Bunn with the Nature Conservancy for organizing today's event. Today's webinar is brought to us with funding from the Campbell Foundation. In 2024, we completed 2 manure management documents where we covered utilizing poultry litter and dairy manure on 4R farms. You can access these 2 documents on our website under the report tab, and we will also link this into the chat box. And that kind of sparked the interest for having today's webinar. Before we dig in too deep, I wanted to do a little short interactive survey for us to better understand who is here with us today. So if you're eligible, pull your phone out and scan the code, or go to another browser and go to menti.com and use code 8702-6508, and we will start those questions. All right, so the first question is, how did you hear about our presentation today? Did you get an email from us? Did you get it from a credit website, word of mouth, or another avenue? All right, we're going to go to the next question. What position best describes your role? Are you an ag retailer, a government employee, a farmer, a crop consultant, an extension agent, an ag organization, or other? All right. So what brings you here today? Are you interested in the presentation, supporting the 4 Rs, you need credits, or other? All right, and then the last question is, are there any upcoming events or opportunities that you would like to share with the group, or you would like a 4R presence at? I know that the summer field days are coming around quicker than we are intending the year to go by. All right, thank you guys for completing that for us. All right, so for those who are joining us for the first time today, the Mid-Atlantic 4R Nutrient Stewardship Association is a nonprofit organization whose members include the Delaware Maryland 4R Alliance and the Pennsylvania 4R Alliance. We strive to fulfill our mission to empower trusted advisors to ensure that every nutrient application in the Mid-Atlantic region is applied with the right source, right place, right rate, and right time to benefit farmers, the environment, and society. Over the last 8 years, we have received $2 million in grant funds, including state, federal, and private foundational dollars that have been used for 4R education and implementation. Through a number of meetings and events, we have exposed nearly 50,000 farms in Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania of 4R practices. In total, we have impacted 4R implementation on 226,279 acres through outreach, education, and direct coaching. We have partnered with the Delaware Nutrient Management Commission to implement an annual supplemental 4R survey for data to be reported at the Chesapeake Bay program, ensuring that farmers are getting credit for nutrient reductions that they're implementing annually. We also created a benchmarking and assessment tool to help farmers determine where they are on the 4R continuum and what the next level implementation would look like for them. Partners have run this tool directly with 1,050 farmers. In addition, we have conducted a statistically significant survey on understanding social and economic barriers to 4R adoption to identify and overcome those barriers with farmers and technical assistance providers. And then lastly, we have hosted a number of 4R webinars and in-person events and plan to continue to do so throughout the years. At this time, we currently have 30 vouchers that are being utilized across our webinar or our watershed, where agribusinesses and farmers are having advanced nutrient management conversations and developing plans that best suit the next steps in 4R farming. Each of these vouchers have the opportunity to implement an improved advanced nutrient management practice with cost share funding. We will be providing additional vouchers in the coming months for small grain crops. So if you're interested in enrolling a farmer or are a farmer and interested in one, please contact us for additional information. We also have additional opportunities forthcoming where more information will be shared through a press release in the coming week, so be sure to sign up for our newsletter. Furthermore, we are wrapping up our 2020 National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant, where a final report will be released and shared. Over the last 5 years, we have grown the organization in strides, and we're very excited to continue to grow the Mid-Atlantic 4Rs. So if you have any questions about the Mid-Atlantic 4Rs, the voucher program, please visit the website or reach out to myself. Happy to touch base. For today's webinar, we will be hearing from 2 speakers as we dive into the core principles of nutrient stewardship with a focus on real-world applications of dairy manure. Eligible credits include 1 nutrient management credit for Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia. In addition, we have Pennsylvania manure broker and hauler credits. And then for the certified crop advisors, we have secured half a credit for nutrient management and half of a credit for soil and water management. So be sure to check in through the Google form linked in your chat box. And then we will also have a checkout form, which must be completed at the end of today's webinar. Today's webinar will be recorded and posted to our YouTube page. Please give us a few days to process this video if you would like to share it with anybody. And for the sake of recording, we ask that everyone stays muted and off cameras. Questions are welcome at the conclusion of each presentation, and you can also submit them at the Q&A at any time. So to begin today's presentation, please welcome Robert Main. Robert is the Director of the Pennsylvania Nutrient Management Education Program and is here today to share about basic best management practices for dairy manure. So thank you for joining us today, Rob. Right, looks good.
I'm sorry, I was muted.
Yep, you're good to go.
I was saying, Amanda, I saw that the note you sent or posted with the Google form only went to the hosts and panelists and not to everybody. So that needs to be resent.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk today just on the basics. I wasn't sure how to prepare for this, and it's great to be here. But when I just looked through the attendee list, I know a lot of you, and I know a lot of you are probably beyond where I'm talking here. And what I hope to do is help set Slush up, but also give you some reminders of what's important in the dairy system. I thought it'd be good to start with just a reminder and a talk for those who aren't as familiar with dairy systems, that our systems in the Mid-Atlantic region are complex when it comes to dairy. Many of them have expanded over time, and we see that systems have been implemented as farms expanded. And we know that, when we look at these photos here, that there can be many manure systems. This last photo, we have manure in the barn, we have manure in storage, we have manure on an ACA, and beyond, we have it in pastures, right? Manure may be liquid, it may be solid and be come from a bedded system. It may be deposited on ACAs or animal concentration areas, which are barnyards and feedlots. It may be uncollected and deposited in pastures. And some of our manure can be treated. I'm not going to go into that much today, but we do know that we can have digestion and manure solid separation, etc., that can treat it. Here are just some photos of what might be common as a rule of thumb at many of our dairy farms. Every dairy farm, as implied in the last set of slides, was that every farm is different. There's no cookie cutter. So every time you step onto a dairy, you're going to see something different. The top three photos here are all from the same spot, right? You can see that there's a calf hutch system, or not a hutch system, but a calf housing system here. And these are solid bedded systems where we're going to have manure deposited into the bedding, and these calves are going to grow there, live there. Periodically, that manure is going to be cleaned out of that little barn, taken to the field for application. Here's some beef cows on the bottom. Just threw that in as another picture of a system. Heifers on the dairy farms often would be housed in something similar to this. You can see in the center here, there's a waterer. That water is going to feed or supply water to two different pens. And then there's a lot of bedding here for those animals beyond. Another system, the first one being a straw type base, and this one being a wood chip or wood shaving type base system that these calves are on. Here are three pictures of the same barn. If we look down the front of this stanchion barn where these cattle are, these are milking cows, right? They're going to feed in this bunk. They're going to feed in this bunk. They are in a tie stall barn, and the manure is going to be deposited into a gutter system behind them. And then this bottom picture is just looking down behind those same cows. The manure is deposited into these gutters and is going to be able to be pulled with a chain type system, or even in some cases flow by gravity with a liquid type based manure out to the bottom of this slide, or the far end of this slide, and then removed to a liquid manure storage. Here's some other photos of what we commonly see with our milking parlors, cows, right? Here, this top one, these animals have access to a bunk, but on the other side, you can see this free stall system where the cows can lay down in those stalls. And in this area in the middle of these first two photos is where the manure is deposited. We have different systems here. One here is a sand bedded system, and that manure can be pulled to one end or flow to one end of the barn. This bottom two photos kind of show that this system here can pull the manure in one direction or the other. This is what this chain would look like, and these collection areas at the end of these pull systems. At the very bottom, we see another area where the manure can be collected. So that liquid manure is deposited in between the stalls on the concrete floor, pulled to the end, and moves to a liquid storage. These freestall areas that we see in the top two pictures, these areas will be cleaned out routinely once or twice a day by the farm. Any manure that's deposited on that will be put into this alleyway and collected. And this top photo on the right, similar idea. You can see the free stalls in the background. You can see a waterer here that's going to add, but this is a slatted floor. So, so the manure is going to fall through that floor into a storage that is underneath. Still, it's a liquid system. You can see in all these photos that the manure is pretty liquid, below a slurry level. Those manures are going to be moved into some type of storage. We had the underfloor storage. The other systems are going to move manure to an outdoor liquid system. Here's just some photos of different systems. We have concrete in-ground system. We have two in-ground systems that are, one is not lined. We don't see many of those constructed today. And we see another one that is lined and has a cover on it to collect any gas that would come off and flare that off. We also have, as in the first photo, first set of slides, if you remember this, the slurry store, the big blue structure above, that also holds liquid manure. So when we get this manure collected, we want to manage it with our nutrient management goals, and we always want to think about these things. If we can serve the farm with the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, the other benefits of manure, the organic matter, and the micronutrients that are in that manure, if we can give that farm agronomic and economic value and do that properly and with proper planning, we also are serving environmental goals. And our rules and regulations help to set that up. Our manure management planning, our nutrient management planning, our nutrient balance sheets, the tools that we use to get the right rate in these systems help to serve the farm agronomic, economically, and environmentally. And I'm going to get into some of the basics of that. A lot of this is review for many of you, including this slide that we've been seeing for a long time, that I inherited from Doug Beagle. And we'll review this, right? If you're not familiar, right? When we have manure that we apply to meet the crop need here, in this case, we'll call it corn, but if we are going to meet the nitrogen availability of that perfectly, we will typically over apply phosphorus. And when we do that, we have the opportunity to see phosphorus levels in the soil rise, and we need to manage for that. Sometimes this high soil test or other things in our phosphorus indexing may cause us to move over here to this type of basis where we apply manure at a phosphorus rate. And when we do that, we typically under apply nitrogen, and we'll have to have that accounted for with some type of fertilizer. So let's start with the phosphorus cycle. Just review this. I like to call it an organic side with this representation of the phosphorus cycle. On the organic end, animal manure, right? The dairy manure that we're putting on the field and our residues that are in the field are going to add phosphorus into the soil in an organic form. That needs to microbially be processed in order to make it to the plant. If we follow the arrows here, right, we got to get that into the soil solution in order for it to go into the plant. On the other end, we often are dealing with mineral fertilizers or commercial fertilizers. That's on the inorganic side that will also have to transport into this soluble phosphorus in order to go to the plant. That is driven by chemical forces and as compared to the amount of microbial processing need on the organic side. Now, what do we want? Here's the red boxes that are important, right? Crop harvest. If all our phosphorus went to crop harvest, we would be very happy and we wouldn't have environmental issues. But of course, we have runoff and erosion that takes that phosphorus away off the field. If it leaves the field edge, it does us no good. We lose the agronomic value, we lose the economic value, and environmentally now it's become a liability. Most of our phosphorus is lost in that runoff and erosion form. So whatever we can do to hold the soil particles and hold the manure nutrients on the field, we need to do, and a lot of our best management practices are aimed to do that at the field level. Leaching is also a concern with phosphorus. If it gets into this soluble form, it can go below the root zone. If it's below the root zone, if it goes where the water goes and it's soluble, we can lose it, right? And that can become an environmental liability if that leaching water comes out somewhere else or enters a groundwater source that is consumed by animals or people. Here's a simpler representation of that, right? With phosphorus, we want the crop uptake to go, but we do know that runoff and erosion represented here, our orange bar is our largest loss, but within that, I have the small, thin blue bar that represents less volume of phosphorus loss, but that's representing the soluble phosphorus. And if we have phosphorus in that soluble form and we have water running off the field, and the soft phosphorus will go where the water goes, and it goes beyond the field edge, we've lost it. And then also leaching is another component of that blue arrow. What we see with no-till systems is that as our surface phosphorus increases over time, because we're not mixing the soil, we do have opportunity for the very top layer of the soil to become saturated chemically with phosphorus, and then some of that phosphorus can disassociate from the soil particles and be more likely to become soluble and run off. So anytime we can keep the water infiltrating into the soil as opposed to running off the edge of the field, we're doing a great thing. Let's move to nitrogen. When we have manure, we have these two soluble and inorganic fractions of nitrogen that make up the total nitrogen. So the soluble is the mineral portion of nitrogen, and organic nitrogen must be broken down. That's a microbial action typically in the field. On the manure test, this is shown ammonium, organic, and as our two constituents, if we add those together, they will always equal total nitrogen. So what happens whenever they enter this from the animal into the nitrogen cycle? We have the organic nitrogen coming out in entering into the nitrogen cycle. On one side, we have the soluble mineral nitrogen entering in the form of ammonium into the other. This organic matter or organic nitrogen, in order to get it to the crop, it needs to be broken down. It needs to be mineralized into the ammonium form. That ammonium then drives around towards the crop and passes through this nitrate cycle. These are important mineral forms of nitrogen that Celeste will also highlight as he goes along with his presentation. When we look at this ammonium form, this is a critical spot in our nitrogen cycle, because that ammonium is necessary for us to get nitrogen from the animal to the root. And there is very many opportunities for this to be susceptible to loss. And one of those losses is volatilization. That NH4 molecule can turn into NH3 and be volatilized, and we lose it to the atmosphere. So when we can do anything to capture and hold that and to decrease the rate of volatilization, we are giving more opportunity for nitrogen to drive toward the crop where we would like to keep it. And whenever we think about manure injection and we cover the manure with soil and we put it beneath the surface, we have less opportunity for this process of volatilization to occur, and we conserve nitrogen, and that helps us better balance our nutrients. So these forms that I've mentioned, ammonium and nitrate, NH4 and NO3, these are mineral forms of nitrogen. They are also soluble and available for the plant. So you can go to the plant. The next slide gives us a representation of that. Right here we have the ammonium. Here we have the nitrate. We have these green arrows superimposed on the cycle here to show us that these can go right to the crop. This arrow being fat, this arrow being skinny, showing and demonstrating that nitrate is taken up into the plant much more than ammonium, because this process of ammonia occurs pretty quickly. Ammonia doesn't stick around a long time. It can either volatilize or move into nitrate and then into the crop. I might note also that nitrate is susceptible to leaching, right? This is a negative charge molecule, soluble, and doesn't want to stick to anything because opposites attract and the same charges repel. And we can often think of soil particles as having a negative charge. So that negative charge in the soil, that negative charge in this molecule, the nitrate doesn't want to stick. So if it's soluble and doesn't want to stick to anything, it goes where the water goes. If the water goes below the root zone, we can lose it. But if the water goes into the root, now we've got it. That's what we want. In this cycle, right, we would love to have all of our nitrogen go to crop removal. We've mentioned some of these losses. The volatilization is a loss of nitrogen. The leaching is a loss of nitrogen. Runoff with erosion or in the form of soluble nitrogen forms is another loss. And denitrification, this nitrate form losing some oxygens and going into a gaseous form that can go into the atmosphere. This is usually a pretty minimal loss of nitrogen, but can be a contributor to greenhouse gas. So in the 4R world, right, placement is important. Here is the critical source idea that we use in phosphorus indexing. And those of you, I know many of you have been through phosphorus index training, right? Phosphorus indexing looks at this as the opportunity for source and transport where they intersect. We call that critical source area. So the sources here, and I'm including nitrogen. Here, I'll explain that in a minute, right? Soil, the fertilizer, the manure can all have nitrogen and phosphorus. We can lose those through erosion, through runoff, through leaching, and for nitrogen only, we can lose it through volatilization. So we want to try to control these. The 4Rs does this for us, right? The 4Rs, if you look at this and think, oh, here's the source, here's the transport, or, following the 4Rs helps us follow these exact things. So the right placement is really important. Here is just an aerial photo. Craig Williams sent me this. If you know him, this is some winter application of manure, but I liked this aerial photo. This is surface manure application, but you can see whenever we do planning, nutrient management planning, manure management planning, here we have a stream, right? We have a setback from that stream in this field, and the holler is following that. We probably have a well around some of these buildings, and the setbacks are being adhered there. Over here, we have another stream, and we have setbacks being adhered for that as well. So the case here is that we are seeing the right placement of the manure. The timing might get some people upset, but we can apply manure in the winter in Pennsylvania if we take the right precautions and do it in a systematic, planned manner. Here's a slide that we've used again for a long time. Let me pull everything in, right? Thinking about the 4Rs and the use of manure nutrients, right? The best time in this case, if we're thinking about nitrogen, we could have nitrogen uptake in the end of the fall as we move into the growing season and before planting. And in here with this corn uptake, right? Whenever we look at the utilization in this system of nitrogen, we want most of it in this system go to the corn, and the biggest portion of nitrogen uptake is in this system. So the timing here for nitrogen application would be best at this spot right before the season's biggest uptake. And this is setting up Salesh because he's going to talk about the PSNT system, which is going to sample the soil right around this time to think about the best timing. Mobilization is also important. I skipped this yellow circle earlier, but if we can immobilize nitrogen into the soil, and phosphorus for that matter, if we can immobilize it and hold it in the soil, it's like having money in the bank, gas in the tank, until the time where the soil temperature and the season is right and the microbial breakdown of this immobilized organic nitrogen can occur. Put this yellow immobilized nitrogen back into the cycle and drive it and make it available at the right time. So some of the things we do for that are cover cropping and crop residue and no-till planting. Things that we can do to help increase soil health, increase soil organic matter are going to help us immobilize nitrogen. Immobilized nitrogen, sorry about this slide getting screwed up here, right? This is the supply of nitrogen from soil organic matter. So the carbon-based material that's in the soil already versus the years of a cover crop. With a cover crop, that increases over time because we're adding in organic matter. It gives us our soil resiliency that can supply nitrogen to the crop because we already have it there. It's being held in the yellow circle. This is the declining amount of nitrogen supplied whenever no cover crop was utilized. Here is just another example of corn yield, right? From 1980 through 2021, what has corn yield done? It's just gone up and up and up. So we also need to think about corn yields whenever we think about how much nitrogen goes into this system. And as I set Celeste up with nitrogen thinking, one last slide on what is the economic optimum return nitrogen rate and how do we think about that as it's pertinent to the pre-sidus nitrate test. This is just simply a growth plant response curve, right? So if we get more bushels of corn with more growth factor, here our growth factor is going to be 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre to get a 200 bushel corn. So if this is 200 bushel corn, this was 200 bushel of or 200 pounds of nitrogen. We add the first 50 gets us about 95 pounds of response. Next 50 pounds gets us 75. The next 50 pounds gives us about 25. That final 50 pounds of nitrogen in this scenario might only get us about 5 pounds or 5 bushel of corn. So our response is not great as we add more. So sometimes more is not always better. And then we get this economic optimum spot. That is where if we put $1 in, we only get $1 out. And that economic spot is typically a better spot to be agronomically, economically, and environmentally. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. And if there's questions, I don't know if we're going to take those now, Janelle, or if we're going to do those later.
Yeah, I haven't had any come through the Q&A, so if you guys have them, be sure to add them into the Q&A. Rob does have to hop off at 11, so if he's available, I'm sure he will answer them in the chat box during Salish's presentation. Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today, Rob, and for that presentation. It was perfect for today's webinar, and we're very excited to have had you, so thank you again. All right, so next we're honored to have Salish Shingle with us. Salish is a current PhD recipient from Penn State University, whose work focuses on nitrogen management in the no-till dairy cropping system in Pennsylvania. Today, Salish is sharing with us about improving manure and nitrogen management in a no-till dairy cropping system. So thank you for joining us. Your other screen is up. So.
Right, yep. Thank you, Janelle.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So now you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Janelle, and thank you everyone for being here today. Just briefly introducing myself, I'm Salesh. I recently completed my PhD from Penn State, Agricultural and Environmental Science Plant Science program, where my work mostly revolved around improving manure and nitrogen management in no-till dairy cropping system. And today I'd be briefly talking about the 4 Rs in manure management and related to some of the case studies where we put this 4R principle into practice to reduce the manure nitrogen loss. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with very basic so that we all are on the same page, which is nitrogen. And nitrogen, it has a great importance in crop production, right? It is one of the most expensive fertilizer input, and it is the most limiting nutrient for crop growth, yield, and productivity, right? And if not carefully managed, especially when lost from the crop or farm, it becomes an environmental pollutant. And as Rob showed, that we cannot deny that the fact that nitrogen management in agricultural setting, it comes with many challenges, right? As nitrogen cycle is very complex. There's a cursor here. It's very complex. It is controlled by microbes. It has many forms, right? And depending on forms, it has many loss pathways, right? And with increasing use, the excess nitrogen in the landscape, it has led to many unintended consequences. And for example, any nitrogen source such as manure, if not immediately incorporated, it can be or utilized by plants or microbes, it can volatilize as ammonia, which is the major nitrogen loss pathway, right? And not just the major form of nitrogen loss, ammonia is also considered as a air and water quality pollutant. And it has also many human health impact. It has been linked to many respiratory issues in us humans. And also the ammonia lost from your farm can redeposit back somewhere in the landscape, polluting your favorite lake or water bodies, right? And on top, it also contaminates the drinking water. Similarly, the nitrogen and phosphorus in the manure can also run off with the surface water, which can lead to a uncontrolled algal bloom in your water streams, favorite lake or water body, creating a dead zone for the marine life. And this is not just a localized or regional problem. There are about more than like 400 such hypoxic dead zones from the excess nutrient in the water, right? And one of the common example that you know and you can relate to is like nutrient pollution in Chesapeake Bay. And if we look at this data from Chesapeake Bay program, you can see uh, the nitrogen load to Chesapeake Bay, most of it comes from Pennsylvania, and most of it originates at agricultural operation, right? So it is critical to control that loss of nitrogen and keep it in the farm. And with the time, the dairy farms in Pennsylvania are consolidating. They are getting more specialized. They have like now high animal stocking rate. Now they have to import feed and fertilizer to support the production, right? So that for that they like import feed and fertilizer from Midwest to this region, right? And it's not just the feed and fertilizer they are importing, they are also importing nutrients in the feed and fertilizer, right? And if we think about as a balance, the imported nutrient in that feed and fertilizer is greater than what Pennsylvania exports or this region exports. So this has caused a significant regional nutrient imbalance, leading to a same problem that I mentioned of like nutrient pollution in Chesapeake Bay, right? Yes, nitrogen is essential. Nitrogen is important, right? It is essential for crop growth, but we also saw that it is very mobile in the environment and it can be lost easily, right? So since our goal is to maximize how much nitrogen the crop takes up, we need to manage the nitrogen source carefully. And that's where the 4R principles of nutrient management come in. They help us apply the nutrient in a way that supports the crop demand while minimizing the losses to the environment, right? Which includes like applying right source at right rate, at right time, and in the right place, right? And by following these principles, we can improve the nutrient use efficiency and promote more sustainable farming system. Even though this 4R principles, this framework was designed by a fertilizer industry, right? These 4R principles are not just for the commercial fertilizers. They apply just as well to the manure, right? Treating manure as a valuable resource, as a valuable nutrient source, and applying it using a right source, rate, time, and place, we can improve the manure nutrient uptake by crops, reduce losses, and at the same time, we can protect our water and air quality, right? And in fact, applying this 4R principles is more even critical for manure due to its like variability and potential for environmental impact if not carefully managed. So the first R to consider while managing manure is knowing your source, right? Right source, meaning like matching the nutrient from the nutrient form to the crop need and soil conditions. And for manure, this means knowing what nutrient it has, like what's the worth of your manure, like how much is in the ammonium form, how much is in the organic form, what are the potassium level, what are the phosphorus level, and knowing how it's stored or treated, right? As you can see, the nutrient composition depends on what types of nutrient you are manure type you're dealing with, whether it's like a liquid raw manure, solid manure, digested manure, and selecting the right source helps to ensure the nutrients are available when the crop needs them, right? And reduce the risk of losses. And another important reason to focus on right source is the high variability in manure, right? If you look at this figure on right, analysis, 311 farmers submitted dairy manure samples from Pennsylvania for a period of time. You can see in this figure, like there is so much variability in the manure, right? And the nutrient content can vary or differ depending on animal species, diet, storage method, how it's handled, right? And for example, the ammonium nitrogen level in like liquid dairy manure can vary by more than 50% between the farm, or even within the same storage pit, right? Due to the nutrient stratification. So that is why the manure testing is very much essential, right? Knowing what's actually in the manure helps to match us that manure nutrient supply to the crop need more accurately. So once we know the nutrient content of the manure, the right source, the next step is applying the right rate, right? So this means supplying manure, supplying enough nutrient to meet the crop need without like over applying or risking losses, right? Getting the right rate, it requires manure testing, knowing how much nutrient is in the manure, right? So talking about the nutrients in the manure, though the manure is a complete package, as Rob showed, like it is not balanced, right? So it needs like careful consideration and management. For example, like the phosphorus and potassium in the manure uh, equals to the phosphorus and potassium in commercial fertilizer, like pound to pound. But the nitrogen available is different. It depends on the manure source, how it's applied, when it's applied. So these things should be considered while applying manure, right? And on top, understanding the crop nutrient demand, what's the yield goal, and accounting for what's already in the soil is very, very important. And such for a manure system, we need to adjust like the supplemental nitrogen needed, sidedress nitrogen with the proper testing, like pre-sidedress nitrogen test that match like how much exact nitrogen your corn need when the corn is about like V6 or V5 stage or like 30 centimeter tall. So here's an example that compares the liquid dairy manure slurry to a liquid separated manure digestate. Here on top, we have solids, which shows that the digestate has lower solids compared to raw manure. And the bottom one, the red box plot, is the proportion of ammonium to total N, right? And you can see the liquid digestate from a commercial dairy farm, it has a higher proportion of ammonium nitrogen, right? If you look at this number, like 45 to 79% of what's being applied at the time of that manure application, it's just like ammonium. And if you, as Rob mentioned, like ammonium is one of the readily available form of nitrogen to the crop, right? And let's say for the same application rate of like 5,500 gallons per acre, the dairy manure digestate supplies 43% more plant available nitrogen than raw manure. So knowing your source and applying the right rate can significantly impact the nitrogen efficiency. So after selecting the right source and applying the right rate, the next step is making sure the nutrients go into the right place, right? Here, the right place means like to deliver the manure where the crop can access it, where the nutrient losses are like minimized, right? Which is typically near the root zone and away from the areas prone to like runoff or leaching, as Rob showed. And for that, application method like really matters. For example, manure injection place nutrient directly into the soil, closer to the crop roots, which reduces like ammonia volatilization, minimize like surface runoff, and improve nitrogen availability for your crop, right? And actually, manure injection is one of the most effective ways, like best management practice, to keep manure nutrients in the field out of the environment. And here's an example of ammonia loss field measurement from 6 different commercial dairy farms where we applied the liquid dairy manure digestate through 2 different application methods, broadcast and inject. In each figure over here, on x-axis, we have time after that liquid manure digestate application. On y-axis, we have ammonia loss rate, right? So the black in each figure represents the surface applied ammonia loss rate, and the red inverted triangle represents the rate of loss for the injected liquid digestate manure, right? And if you look at across all the farm, we can see there was a significant difference in ammonia loss rate at 1 hour and 6 hour after that digestate manure application. And when we looked at, when we pooled the data across the farm, we saw that at 1 hour and 6 hour, the ammonia loss rate was almost double for surface broadcasted liquid manure digestate compared to inject. So meaning like you're losing nitrogen at a double rate compared to like injecting at 1 hour and 6 hour digestate application. So in like the method of application, the immediate incorporation is really important to conserve nutrients in your soil, right? And if you look at this, this is from Penn State Agronomy Guide. This is the manure ammonium nitrogen availability factors. And you can see over here, the ammonium nitrogen availability from manure declines as incorporation is delayed. This is supporting like just the figure that you saw across all of our commercial dairy farms, right? If it's immediately incorporated, the ammonium and availability factor is like about 80%. Or if it's not incorporated at all, or surface applied and left as it is, only 10% is the availability factor of the total ammonium for that spring and summer application to the crop, right? And injecting manure does not just reduce losses, it also improves nutrient use efficiency. For example, if you look at this result from dairy cropping system experiment site from Rock Spring, Pennsylvania, that compared injection to surface broadcast in a 6-year dairy rotation over like 12 years. The result showed that field receiving injected manure required less supplemental nitrogen to meet the similar yield compared to those receiving the broadcasted manure, right? So the better placement here means more nitrogen stays available for the crop, reducing input cost and improving the nutrient balance. The last R is the right time. This means applying manure when crop can actually use the nutrient, right? And having said that, we have to consider like the weather and seasonal conditions as well. For example, the ammonia loss can be quite high after manure application on a very hot day. So target applying manure when it's like cooler, right? Fall or winter application can often lead to leaching or runoff before the plant can use the nutrient, right? Especially under like fallow conditions or absence of like growing crop. And spring or in-season application with a growing crop reduces loss through ammonia volatilization, another form of nitrogen loss, which is denitrification, and also reduced nitrate leaching, right? And a good practice of manure application to a cover crop or winter crop can increase manure nitrogen uptake and reducing loss to the environment. So when summing up, to sum up, it's not just like one R that makes a difference, right? There is no one magic R. So all four, right source, right rate, right time, right place, need to work together. So when we manage them as a system, not individually, we get a better crop performance and a fewer manure nutrient losses, right? So now let's shift gear towards something interesting, where we put these 4R principles into practice to reduce different manure nitrogen losses, right? So, so by now we know that ammonia loss can be quite high with surface applied manure, which reduces its manure nitrogen availability, reduces its fertilizer value, and it also contributes to environmental problem, right? And injecting manure through manure injection helps to reduce that ammonia loss by significantly, right? Significantly, and this has a great importance in a no-till system like in Pennsylvania, right? But there have been many research now which shows that this injection leaves more nitrogen in the soil susceptible to loss as nitrous oxide through nitrification and denitrification process in that nitrogen cycle, right? If we compare, well, this is not a great a bigger proportion of nitrogen being lost compared to ammonia volatilization. This nitrous oxide needs attention because it is another potent greenhouse gas that's like 273 times potent than carbon dioxide. So if you don't like carbon dioxide, you will not like nitrous oxide. And since it is another form of nitrogen loss, you want to keep that nitrogen in your farm, right? And reducing your like input cost to buy out some synthetic fertilizer later in the season, right? And one thing we know we're doing right with this manure injection is that manure nitrogen is being delivered at the right place, right? But there was still a question if using a right method, which is manure injection, and timing it with better timing with cover crop could further reduce the manure nitrogen losses. And to find out, we conducted a field study to test like how application methods, timing, with and without cover crop impact both ammonia, which is the major nitrogen loss pathway, and nitrous oxide losses while maintaining the corn yield, right? And for that, we have evaluated can applying manure early in the spring to a growing cover crop could reduce like gaseous losses and conserve N for the corn. And for that, we evaluated two application timing early in the spring to a growing cover crop, which is more like an aspirational practice, right? And compared it to the late spring manure application after the cover crops are terminated or before corn planting, right? This is more like a business as usual or like prevailing practice. And we evaluated this two timings under two method of application, inject versus surface broadcast. And we hypothesized that early spring raw manure application, both inject and broadcast growing cover crop will facilitate cover crop manure and uptake, reduce gaseous ammonia loss, and reduce nitrous oxide loss, right? And to test that hypothesis, we designed a study, which was a randomized split block design, where the whole plot compared manure application method, as you can see in the figure, inject versus surface broadcast. And the subplot factor within that whole plot, it compares two application timing. Early spring manure application into growing cover crop versus late spring application into terminated cover crop, right? So there were like total 4 treatment combination. And in the study, the manure were injected at like every 18-inch band. And in the study, the corn was grown after annual ryegrass and red clover, which receives manure early in the spring, received in the spring through like 2 different methods of application, broadcast manure and inject manure. So the only difference in here is like how the manure is supplied, right? And the application rate was like 4,300 gallons per acre, and total nitrogen applied over the course of like 2 years of this study was like 151 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. And if we look at this dairy cropping system project, and if we compare it to a commercial dairy farms, there are like some difference. For example, the one significant difference is like manure frequency. At this site, we only applied like 4 times out of like last 6 years, whereas we have seen in commercial dairy farms they apply 2 to 3 times a year, right? Which is a lot. So the first thing after the raw manure application, we measured ammonia loss. This was of a greater interest to us because this is the major nitrogen loss pathway, and we captured that ammonia loss for like 72 hours, right? And when we look at the results, here we have ammonia volatilization loss that compares early spring manure application into a growing cover crop versus late in the spring after the cover crops are terminated or before the corn planting, right? And same as before, we have time after the raw manure application. On the y-axis, we have ammonia loss rate for broadcast and inject. And if we look at within each application timing, we can see the broadcast and inject had significantly greater loss rate of ammonia at 1 hour and 6 hours after the application compared to inject, right? And if we compare early versus late, you can see the magnitude of loss, that ammonia loss is significantly greater, right? You're losing ammonia at a very great rate later in the spring when the temperature are warmer compared to early spring and absence of any growing crop over here, right? So it does matter whether you inject or broadcast, and also it also depends whether you are where the manure application is done in like a cooler day or like warmer day, right? So these things should be considered. So when we pulled out that cumulative ammonia loss data for that 72 hours after manure application, we can see over here, we saw that late spring broadcast manure on the terminated cover crop had the greatest ammonia loss over both years. And as I showed before, the injection, when you immediately incorporate it, it's already doing its work, right? It's already doing its wonder. So based on our data, we saw that if you immediately incorporate it, it doesn't matter whether you apply it early in the season to a growing cover crop versus late in the spring after the cover crops are terminated. So immediate incorporation really helps over here. And another thing we looked at was the biomass and uptake in that cover crop as the manure was applied to the growing crop, growing cover crop, right? And we saw a significant effect of application timing in N uptake, where we saw that biomass N was 86% greater in the cover crop that receives manure early spring, right? And for a dairy farm that double crops or harvest the winter crop as a silage, rather than managing it as like a cover crop, it means more crude protein in the silage, right? More nitrogen is recycled back to producing milk. And this also means reduction in need to buy the supplemental protein source, right? And here, like even though the nitrogen is tied to the cover crop biomass, when we look at the C2N ratio, the C2N ratio was almost half in the cover crop that received early manure, suggesting like quick release after termination. So after that, we looked at another form of nitrogen loss, which is nitrous oxide, and we measured this form of nitrogen loss throughout the growing period, right? And here's the changes in daily nitrous oxide loss, like measured over time after manure application. And this is just an example of 2022 growing season. On x-axis, we have day of year. As you move up, we have soil temperature, soil moisture, and precipitation. So all of these factors regulates the nitrogen loss, right? And on top, we have changes in daily nitrous oxide flux, again, measured over the time. And a couple of interesting things over here. Here E means the early spring manure application, L means the late spring manure application after cover crop termination or before corn planting, which is shown as P and over here, right? So a couple of interesting things. We saw that increase in nitrous oxide flux, especially later in the spring after the application after the cover crops are terminated, when temperature is warmer. There are some precipitation, soil moisture from precipitation. The NTO peaks are like greater, right? And if you look at the early spring manure application timing, there's a low levels of nitrous oxide loss, or another form of nitrogen loss, when the temperature are cooler and actively growing crop. And we saw a similar pattern later in the season when the corn, which is like actively growing, takes up any available nitrogen, or that's any mineralized nitrogen over that period, leading to almost like negligible loss at this later stage. And when we pulled out data, as I mentioned, previous studies has shown that for at least for the later spring part, that when you inject, you see a later like higher nitrous oxide emission, but we did not see like a significant difference between a late inject and late broadcast, but there was like a trend of higher nitrous oxide loss when it was injected later in the season, absence of cover crop, the temperature were warmer, there was some precipitation, as this was not significantly different at 0.08 value, right? So there was some trend, but as we hypothesized, we did not see a significant difference early in the season when manure was applied to a growing cover crop temperature were cooler, right? And as you can see, there was a effect of timing. You can see the green colored bars are like both smaller than the brown bars over here. And when we pulled our data across this application method, we saw that applying manure early in the spring, the cumulative nitrous oxide emission were almost 50% less, right? Which is a great importance, but it is the potent greenhouse gas, and it is also another form of nitrogen loss, right? So that's a significant reduction, like by 50%. And we also saw when we did a PSNT, pre-side dress nitrogen test, when the corn was about like V6 stage, and we saw that there was a greater conservation of nitrogen with injected manure, right? On average, we saw that there was a 46% greater soil nitrate level in inject treatment compared to surface broadcast, which means surface application needed like 40% more inorganic side dress nitrogen to meet the yield goal, right? Corn stalk nitrate level, which tells you whether the corn has sufficient nitrogen, too little or too much. It also validated our data that there was a greater conservation, nitrogen conservation with the injected treatment, right? And looking at the yield, we saw that some interesting things with the guanciale yield. There was no difference if you just compare the early inject versus late inject. We also did not see any difference between late spring manure application to dead cover crop when accounting for broadcast and inject yield. But when we looked at the early spring, the early injecting manure increased the quality by 19% compared to surface application early, right? And the early surface application produced like 11% less corn silages compared to late banding. And so just to sum up the learnings from this case study, we saw that injecting manure into a growing cover crop early in the spring when the temperatures are cooler, mineralization is slower, cover crop taking up, and it is a win-win practice, right? As we saw, there was a significant reduction in ammonia loss. It increased nitrogen availability. It reduced nitrous oxide. It also maintained the corn yield compared to the business as usual or like prevailing practice of late spring into terminated cover crop or before corn planting, right? And also for the surface applied manure to a growing cover crop early in the spring. This practice also reduced ammonia loss, increased nitrogen and uptake by cover crop. It also reduced nitrous oxide, but we did see some slight reduction. So there should be some consideration while sulfurous applying. So if you're planning to apply manure early in the spring, injection is a way to go, right? So how are we doing with the time? So that's all. So if you have any question, I would love to take or answer that. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, Salish, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I do appreciate that. We had a few questions that Rob took an opportunity to answer in the Q&A. So if individuals here need to get off, we completely understand. I threw in the Google form for credits into the chat box, so you'll be able to access that there. But Ryan asked if soil aeration and infiltration affect nitrogen loss. Rob provided an answer, but if you wanted to add anything to that, you are welcome to do so.
Well, it does. It does have a great effect. The aeration, like filtration, has a great effect in nitrogen loss. So the main idea, like ammonia loss, if it for the ammonia loss standpoint, if it infiltrates into the soil, like you would see some kind of reduction in ammonia loss compared to just leaving it bare on the soil surface, right? So the exposing it to the environment, it leads to more loss compared to having it into your soil. So it does help.
Awesome. Thank you for that. If you have any other questions, you're welcome to put them in the Q&A, and we'll be happy to get to them. And then today's presentation will be recorded. We will share this through a press release with the summary as well as a link to the YouTube. We've had a few responses saying great presentation, Shailesh. So
thank you
so much. Otherwise, if you need assistance getting credits, please let us know. We've added them to the chat and we added them to a Q&A response previously. Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to keep an eye on our future newsletters to keep up to date with what we're doing. So we appreciate everyone joining, and we appreciate our speakers. So thank you all again, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.